Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about gay men and how to ruin a friendship. 10 tips. In my 29 years as a gay men specialist therapist in Los Angeles in 2021, as well as being an ASEC, American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, certified sex therapist, and life, career, executive coach for guys all over the world, I've helped a lot of guys with interpersonal relationships. This can be about dating, sexuality, workplace, and certainly domestic and romantic relationships. There are many models of therapy or coaching interventions, tips that help a guy to improve relationships. But what about friendships? We could talk about what to do in order to win friends and influence people, as the classic book by Norman Vincent Peale talked about. But just for a certain dark-humored fun, let's look at what not to do in a friendship, especially between two gay men. Based on my work with clients and stories from friends, I've identified these 10 tips if you really want to mess it up. And who doesn't love that, right? Okay, so in no particular order, here are the 10 tips of how to ruin a good friendship. Number 1 is being cheap. Yep, be a cheap-ass queen. Be the old holdout. Be that bitch who won't part without a buck without a crowbar pulling it out of your clenched fist. Pinch that penny until it screams. You know, we've all seen this. Girlfriend has a birthday dinner and everybody's got to pitch in. Sometimes split the bill in equal amounts according to the number of guests, minus the birthday bottom. Divided into the check total, sometimes according to what each person ordered. The Lushes with the premium vodka cocktails coming all the time, that really drives up the tab. But old holdout doesn't want to put in his fair share just to see what he can get away with. Or shows up at a sit-down dinner party or even a wedding empty-handed, which is both cheap and rude. Everything is always done on the cheap. And by this, I don't mean a reasonable, keyword reasonable, attempt at sticking to a budget for long-term financial security. Now that I support. But I'm talking about the queen who doesn't have a money care in the world except for just being cheap for the sake of being cheap, not out of necessity. Just a miserliness that has developed as a bad habit, maybe with themselves and maybe even in their family of origin. If you're continually the one on the guest list that's cheap to the point of others noticing regularly, you will find that you don't make it to guest lists for much longer. Unless you are really, really pretty, and that has a certain shelf life that doesn't last forever. You don't want to buy friends by giving them money or expensive gifts or drugs or pay their way every time you go out, like with movie tickets or dinner or admission tickets. But you do want to be reasonably matching the level of expenditure of your gay male peers in the time and place in which you live, the local culture, the local economy, relative to everybody's means. And, this gets awkward when, girlfriend who wants to have her birthday party at an expensive restaurant and the bill is split evenly, which is when you have to make the painful decision to sit this one out and take them on a birthday lunch or dinner that you can afford later. Good financial planning means that you can provide for your long-term financial security and still not be the one who is clearly not paying their fair share. You don't get to be financially secure by being cheap. You get to be financially secure by identifying and implementing a sound savings and investment plan over time. Maybe with the help of a very gay-savvy financial planner, or certainly with studying some financial planning books that come well recommended and by people who have some credentials. I always recommend people like Jane Bryant Quinn on Amazon, for example, or Susie Orman, the lesbian financial planner. I don't recommend Dave Ramsey. He's got some good ideas, but Dave Ramsey has written some personal financial books, but he's known to be anti-gay if you look him up. So I tend to stick with people who are either neutral or LGBT affirmative, like Jane Bryant Quinn and certainly Susie Orman. But remedying this bad reputation for being cheap is where your personal finance skills matches your interpersonal relation skills. Be aware about the portion of your personal financial management budget that's allocated to things like meals out and other activities with your peers. Trust that if you allocate an appropriate savings in other ways, such as always saving about 10 to 15% of your income in long-term financial security and investment, that you can spend another portion of your income just for leisure. And trust that if everyone else is paying in proportion to what they are costing, like at a group dinner or a group outing, then you need to also. There's an inherent fairness and goodwill in equity, or relative equity. If you drank more, pitch in more. Have your friends having your friends experience you as being reasonably fair or even generous will earn you goodwill and make people want to hang out with you. But being cheap will alienate your friends so much that you won't have them as friends for long. Don't be that guy. Trust in the process that you're going to be okay. Just keeping everything fair. So number 2 is complaining. I hear this one often, and I admit I've been guilty of it, especially in my past. I try to really walk my talk for overall professional credibility, but even I have my vulnerabilities, especially earlier in my life. And the complaining trap is when you use get-togethers with one or more of your friends to just vent and unload all the pet peeves and objections and stressors and grave injustices that you've experienced since you've last seen them. And while it can feel good to vent, this is one of the many benefits of therapy, and get things off your chest, you want to bring a certain mindfulness to this. Because as the weight from your shoulders gets thrown off, sometimes it lands in your buddy's lap with an impact. And the cumulative effect of this can be that your friend feels burdened by what you're offloading. That's great for you, but it can make them feel used. This habit can be a sign of a bigger problem. You're in the wrong job, you're in the wrong relationship, you need to seriously improve your own self-care or burnout prevention strategies, or you need more support and help for a possible clinical depression that's making you hopeless or irritable. So to avoid this, be aware in the back of your mind while you're talking that you're balancing venting with giving them a chance to speak too, and see if you can join forces to do something about the mutual complaints, or to jointly identify fun things to balance out the pet peeves. Listen to them, sure, but also listen to yourself. Negative material in the verbal content of what you say can alienate people who are just wanting to have a nice time out with a friend. Play a game that for every item that you gripe about, another item is something that's good news or something that you're grateful for. Number 3, being racist or bigoted. This should be a no-brainer by now in 2021, but it's true. White gay men especially can be guilty of being bigoted and racist. It's not that others can't, but, we see it sometimes in the white guys. And I don't agree with this current notion that I see written about in social media sometimes that makes white gay men a part of the problem politically and socially, and I see that happening sometimes in this whole kind of woke thing. I'm politically and socially very progressive, and also certainly an LGBT advocate, particularly with my specialization in gay men. But lately I've been hearing a little bit that if you're a white gay male, your white privilege and your male privilege somehow is superseding the fact that you're a sexual minority and being gay, and that makes you, part of the problem. This is really debatable. But I'm talking about when I've seen and heard gay men being racist, especially white gay men being racist with other white gay men. And, I don't like that any more than when I hear people of color being homophobic, which, can be a thing. So, to advance the civil rights of all minorities, more minority groups need to band together to fight the tyranny of the majority. Minority groups are stronger when we all fight together against the common enemy of bigotry and oppression in all different social and economic ways. But I still hear remarks, now and then, usually in the form of jokes, where white gay men are saying something offensive. Even if they're not called out on it, and they should be, people can quietly cringe, and your stock price of popularity will go down. In most cases. If they're talking to a fellow racist and validating them, then, that's another whole story, and that's just kind of a mess. But you want to try to speak in ways that support dignity and social justice for others, including members of groups who aren't even in the room. And if you read for filth once in a while, like RuPaul says in RuPaul's Drag Race, do it in a way that's funny, not offensive, and subject to the individual and their little quirks, not an entire race of people. That's kind of antiquated, and it's always kind of a social ill that we just don't need to be a part of, particularly as being members of sexual and gender minorities ourselves. Number 4 is name dropping. Since I live and work in Los Angeles, or more specifically West Hollywood, the bad habit of name dropping, especially in entertainment, can be a thing in gay social circles. And it can be fun to share, brushes with celebrity greatness, or foulness, as the case may be. But it's a classic sign of social insecurity to name drop about whom you've met or known or worked with, as if you just being little old you weren't good enough. Now, this needs to be contrasted with people who are good raconteurs, who tell a good story about famous people, but there's a balance there. This is similar to speech that implies how much money you have, such as always talking about access to luxury brand goods or services or experiences, and that also speaks to insecurity. I am valuable because I can afford valuable things. That's a faulty logic, and it's almost always alienating to others, especially if you're speaking to someone who can't afford those things. Modesty in social interactions leads to quality of social interactions because you're avoiding trying to imply that you're in some way superior to whomever you're talking to. You want to make the people you're talking to feel good about themselves and want to be with you and not feel bad about themselves in a way that makes them want to avoid you. When guys complain about being lonely, this is the consideration they should reflect on, because if you're often lonely, it could mean that you're messing it up interpersonally when you're with people. Number 5 is being self-centered. Similar to name dropping, if the content of what you're saying socially has a lot of I this and I that in it, it can send a subtle message that you don't care about the person you're talking to, as long as you have a faceless and nameless and soulless audience to play to. That makes the person you're talking to feel invisible and invalidated. But asking open-ended questions of the other person, reflecting or validating what they're saying, and asking gently probing questions about what they experienced or how they feel, that can engender a goodwill and make the other person feel seen and heard and understood, which is a great feeling to give them. It's going to make them more drawn to you. Number 6 is bad breath or hygiene or presentation. So this one is fairly common, but it's really taboo to talk about. Recently, I was at a fundraising event for supporting my husband's work and was meeting a very wealthy man who was a major donor to the institution. And he was late middle age, but as he spoke, I noticed he had particularly bad breath. Here was this interesting, accomplished, generous man, but this simple hygiene issue made me want to get away from him. And when I saw him at another event shortly thereafter, despite originally finding him nice and very interesting, I still avoided him. Bad breath can indicate a tooth or a gum problem, or possibly a digestive issue, or even a large medical risk that needs the attention of a dentist or a periodontist or an internist, or other healthcare professional to address the root cause and provide treatment for it. So ask a trusted friend frankly if they think that you have a breath problem or any other trait about you that might be socially offensive. And while some people, including gay men, especially leather men, forego deodorant due to allergies or even appreciation of man scent, this can be very controversial depending on the audience and the context. I don't think there's much alternative other than to identify a trusted friend or perhaps your own partner or spouse just to check on what kind of social impression they think you make. If you sense at all that people, friends, colleagues, even strangers, avoid speaking with you, consider investigating if is there some variable or trait that could be alienating them. What is your impression on others as a general rule? There's no shame in the exploration, and somehow addressing the issue can be enlightening and even empowering, and that can lead to making a better impression on both friends and strangers. Think about the traits that help a salesperson to make a good impact on customers and increase sales. It's probably a combination of many different positive traits that help them to sell. Well, there's a non-professional version of that, of the impact that you have on other people, whether it's strangers or actually people you've known for a long time, your closer friends. Number 7 is bragging. So similar to the name dropping, some guys have a maladaptive coping for a social anxiety by way of bragging to others about owning expensive things, accessing expensive services, enumerating their accomplishments, or notifying or reminding others of their rewards or their accomplishments. So while taking an appropriate pride in what you do, whether for a living or for a hobby, is understandable, when you brag, or even that humble brag, like on social media, that can be off-putting to others. And it's like the previously mentioned hygiene issues, but be something that no one even tells you is a problem. They just avoid you silently, and you might never know why. So to address this, think about the overall content of your speech to others in most social situations. Friends, family, acquaintances, neighbors, colleagues, etc. And ask yourself, how much bragging content is in your speech? Are you reciting a lot of facts or points that are really just enumerating reasons I'm fabulous more so than you? And if so, think about how you can restate those into perhaps things that you're grateful for or things that you have fun doing. And then turn it around and ask your conversation partner what they're grateful for these days, or what they have fun with. How do they like to spend their time? What's been a perk for them in this COVID era where stress has been more abundant than perks, I think. And this will help your partner that you're talking to, as they're talking back to you, access positive feelings and thoughts that your conversation evoked, and make them even unconsciously drawn to you by associating you with positive feelings. And if you brag, it can make them access negative feelings, like feeling envy or jealousy or frustration or loss or impatience with themselves, or even low self-esteem, that they don't have those things you are bragging about, or they're not doing those things that you're bragging about. Think about what feelings you evoke in others by the content of what you say to them. Number 8 is asking for favors. Trading favors with friends is what can be part of what being a friend means. Giving rides or giving feedback or providing company or perhaps even pet sitting or lending appliances like a wetback, can all be things that a friend might do for another. But be careful about asking a friend who is a professional for their work-related advice, such as from an attorney or a physician or even a therapist friend. There can be legal and ethical admonitions in the professions about giving professional counsel to personal contacts without their legal consent. And it's also just poor boundaries that create a dual relationship between being friends and being professional colleagues. It's also similar to what I said earlier about being cheap, that if you're being too miserly to hire a professional outright and you're expecting your friend to suddenly go on the clock for free, that can be off-putting in a way that they might not ever tell you, but they'd certainly feel it and think it. So to address this, don't ask for a favor without first thinking about the last time you did a favor for them. Is there at least some semblance of a sense of balance there? Is it give and take, or just the latest take that you're making from them? Too much of accessing their expertise or their time or their belongings can make your friend feel exploited. Again, a negative emotion in a way that might make them avoid you, even permanently. Another rule of thumb is don't ask for a favor from someone via email or text or call unless you also contact that person, especially recently, for a non-favor reason. Favors should be part of a broader friendship, give-and-take relationship, not just the basis for the whole relationship, such as only calling Joe when you need to use his stuff. Call Joe for going to the movies this weekend and lunch in 2 weeks. Then in 3 weeks, if you need to use his wetback, okay, ask to borrow it, but only if you take him out to dinner a week later in return. What's in it for Joe? Number 9 is locker room bragging. Gay men, especially I think the younger generation, has a lot more tendency or even comfort to kiss, or more than kiss, and tell. Talking about, even bragging about a sexual escapade or landing a date with a known desirable person. Hey, guess who I totally sucked last night? Hunky Brandon from the gym. That can evoke feelings of envy or jealousy in your friend. Now, perhaps your friend has positive emotions evoked. There's a fun shock. Oh my God, you didn't. Amusement, vicarious joy for you, or pride in your chutzpah. But that can be debatable, especially if you enjoy traditional appearance privilege, let's say. I did a podcast on appearance privilege a while back that you can see on the episode list. If you have that and they don't, it can make them feel bad because you're able to land Hunky Brandon, but they're not. So to address this, take your cue from your friend. Does he talk about his sexual experiences? Does the relating of sexy stories feel balanced to you, or is it just you or him who tells them? How would the person being talked about, Hunky Brandon from the gym, how would he feel if he knew that he was being talked about later? Would he feel embarrassed or exposed or objectified or even betrayed? That could be considered a form of non-consent, and consent is one of the primary principles of sexual health. I did an episode previously on the 6 principles of sexual health as applied to gay men. And the first one is about consent. So, as the saying goes, discretion is the better part of valor. Kiss and tell only with caution. And even though it's somewhat common for both straight male and gay male cultures to do this, just be careful of the toxic masculinity, gay or straight, that's implied in this kind of behavior. And I have a previous episode on toxic masculinity in gay men, because it can be a thing. Number 10 is being inconsistent or a fair weather friend or unsupportive. A trait of good friends is that they are consistent and reliable. They are there for you over time, come thick or thin. No one likes a fair weather friend who's there when you're all well and fun, but abandons you if you're sick or depressed or busy or burdened by something like a personal emergency. Ever been in the hospital? And did you notice which friends did or did not visit you there? Ever had a serious illness that people knew about, like COVID or cancer or the flu or whatever? And did you notice who called or reached out to you versus who didn't? When I had cancer in 2001 and early 2002, I really noticed who was there for me and who wasn't. And when it was all over, I made a conscious intention to spend more time, note to self, spend more time with the friends who stuck by me, and less time, or none, with the so-called friends who didn't. A friend in need is a friend indeed, as the old saying goes. So part of what makes long-term close friends feel good and nostalgic about their friends is the cumulative, enduring wealth of experiences that are shared between the two of you over time. And like the wedding vows, it's for better or for worse in sickness and in health. So are you supportive to your friends? If they announce that they're writing a novel, do you undermine that by challenging them, or do you support their dream? If they want to embark on a special project, do you explore how that could help them or be rewarding, or do you shoot down their aspirations? The best friends are perceived as encouraging and supportive, even if you need to occasionally give cautionary feedback, like if your friend is doing something foolhardy or impulsive or dangerous or illegal or maybe even somehow harmful to others. Instead of just taking a negative action, you know, these things that make you, you don't want to be that guy, who is guilty of behaviors that alienate your friends, study also the most popular and well-regarded people that you know. What traits did they have that you might be able to adapt for yourself, for your own personality and in your value system? Everybody loves people like Dolly Parton or Betty White. And what makes them so popular? Most people find Dolly to be funny, self-deprecating, self-expressive, her own unique style, hard-working, talented, and almost never an unkind word for anybody. So, maybe this is just very carefully crafted, public relations to sell records, but I think it goes beyond that for her, to her credit. I don't know her, but I've worked with people who have. See, I just name dropped, sorry. But, but I've heard that, she really is a very nice, good-natured person. Betty White is known for longevity in television, her smile, her humor, her kindness to animals, her work ethic, and, a certain kind of down-to-earth wisdom, and a certain kind of being game for just about anything. And I've also heard from people who've known her that, she can be known to have the slightly unkind word for people who annoy her, but putting it in funny terms kind of takes the sting out of it. Like her character Sue Ann Nivens from the old 1970s Mary Tyler Moore show about the sweet homemaker who also could have a zinger in there when she didn't like somebody. But, you don't have to be 100% angel all the time. But think about these really well-known people, or conversely, people who are generally unpopular. Look at Donald Trump. He's generally unpopular because he's known to be harshly, even crudely critical of people who don't support him. He's egomaniacal. He doesn't show respect to other world leaders. And even personally, we all know people. Think of the most popular people we know and what makes them that way. Now think about the most unpopular people you know, and think about the traits that make them that way. See how that's an education? And then think about yourself. Are you more like the people you want to be like who are popular? Or are you guilty of being more like the people who are particularly unpopular in your circle? These are things that can be changed over time. So, think about the people you're always glad to see, whether you're at the gym or a pride celebration or a pool party or a holiday party or a charitable event, and ask yourself, why are you glad to see them? What are they doing, behaviorally or verbally, that makes you associate them with attractive and positive qualities? Sure, if they're just hot and evoke lust in many or most people around them, that will make them generally popular. And those are the rules of appearance privilege. But how many of us have seen hot guys and found their personalities to be off-putting, and it makes us avoid them? Now think about hot or funny or clever or generous guys and how they make us feel. Even guys who just smile a lot can increase their social cachet, and that's a pretty simple act to follow. It doesn't take time or money and effort to just kind of smile more. So if you reduce the number of traits that alienate friends, and you increase the actions that attract them, you might feel more socially supported, less abandoned, more included in your local community, and more integrated into the broader local community of LGBT people or of gay men that you live near or with. Try it over time and see if you evoke a different scenario in how you relate to people. It's really worth a try. And, as I always say, if you want specialized help for how to cope with social anxiety or how to cultivate the cognitive and behavioral traits and changes that might help you to have better interpersonal relationships anywhere, personally or professionally, please consider therapy. If you're someone who resides in California, where I'm licensed to practice therapy, or personal life or executive coaching with me as a gay men's specialist. You can always call or text area code 310-339-5778. That's in the U.S. at 310-339-5778. Or email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com. And of course, gaytherapyla.com is where I have blog articles and information about my services and you can always get more information, or if you want to book an appointment. And please share or review. I'm looking at my numbers of the podcast, and I'm thrilled that there are guys all over the world in places I'll probably never get around to visiting, but I think it's fascinating. And I really appreciate your listening and being a part of the podcast. But I'd like to ask a favor in that I'd like you to leave a review if you can, especially if you like the show, and share with your friends so that we can reach more guys. I want to help more people by offering the free podcast. And preview, I'm going to be developing the Gay Coaching LA app, a membership app for guys all over the world to access some of extra materials that aren't available in other places. And so be on the lookout for the launch of the Gay Coaching LA app, and I'll probably have an episode devoted to that. And we're going to develop it together. We're going to have the app for just a small monthly membership fee, and then we're going to have special content there, including a group Zoom call each month. And that'll be kind of an educational Q&A, so that instead of just listening like on a podcast, we can have a little more give and take, which I think would be fun with gay men from all over the world. So be on the lookout for the Gay Coaching LA app. And then in the meantime, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.